Hello and welcome. This is Malvika Pandey and you're watching NewsX. In the biggest news that we're tracking right now, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has released its 15-page preliminary report on the Air India crash that took place in Ahmedabad on June 12th. The report, which examines the sequence of events and engine behavior leading up to the incident involving a Boeing 7878 aircraft, offers the first official insight into what transpired. The investigation team will review additional evidence being sought from stakeholders. 3 seconds after takeoff, both engines' fuel control switches transitioned from run to cut off within 1 second of each other, leading to sudden loss of thrust. The flight data shows a relight was automatically attempted and succeeded for engine 1, but engine 2 failed to recover despite multiple fuel reintroductions. Engine and aircraft order EAFR data showed a rise in exhaust gas temperature in both engines following the fuel switch back to run, indicating combustion during relight attempts. However, the AFT engine and aircraft flight recorder was found to be substantially damaged in the incident and could not be downloaded using conventional methods at this stage. The AAIB has not issued any safety recommendations for Boeing 7878 aircraft or the GE GenX 1B engine operators and manufacturers. I have at this time my colleague Brian Anthony Thomas joining me on the broadcast for more on this story. Brian, the preliminary report has come out, but before we look at that, we'll first take a look at this preliminary report that has come out. We'll take a closer look at the report over here on our screens right now. Well, this is the preliminary report of the accident involving Air India's B7878 aircraft, of course the AI-171. Here we take a look at the detailed report, the 15-page report which details all your information, the aircraft type, the pilots, the number of persons on board. It also provides a background where it talks about the accident and the AAIB being informed of it and the investigation being initiated, of course. It goes into much detail about the aircraft model as well, but it is here that we see further details emerging. We see that the last major line maintenance check as per the aircraft maintenance program was carried out at 12 hours and was the next check was of course due in December 2025. It also tells us that both engines were recently installed, with the left hand engine being installed on 1st May 2025 and the right hand engine being installed on 26th March 2025. So this is all shortly before the accident on 12th June 2025, of course. Now we look further here, it goes into some detail about the damage to the aircraft as well as the buildings that it crashed into, the wreckage and impact. Here we see that a total of 6 buildings were affected by this aircraft crash in Ahmedabad. We then go into some detail about the buildings and the accidents, of course, but it is here again that we see a look at the weather at the time, and it shows that the weather trends were not significant. So there was no issues with regards to the weather again, which is another important point over here. And here it is, we see a detailed communication of the aircraft, the conversation with the air traffic control. We see that at 7 hours 43 minutes is when the aircraft requested pushback and startup, which were approved by the ATC. We then see till about 8 hours 3 minutes, we see what is usually being done, or the aircraft is instructed to line up on the runway. It is cleared for takeoff from the runway at 8 hours 7 minutes. But Barely 2 minutes, not even 2 full minutes later, at 8 hours and 9 minutes, the Mayday call is made by the AI-171 aircraft. So within 2 minutes, till from 7 hours 43 minutes to 8 hours 7 minutes, we see all your regular checks being done. There are no issues being reported, and within 2 minutes of being cleared for takeoff, we see the Mayday call being made by the aircraft. So I have at this point my colleague Brian joining me before we of course get into some details about the recordings recovered. Brian Thomas is joining us live on the broadcast. Brian, the preliminary report of course has been released by the AAIB. Please take us through the details. What are the initial findings that we are seeing? Well, Brian will be joining us shortly. I think there are some issues with the connection over there, but we can look at some details about the flight recorders that were recovered. But my colleague at this point, Riya Dwivedi, is joining us for more details. Riya, big development in the AI-17 crash that took place in June. The preliminary report has now been released. What are we learning? What are the details, the key details that are emerging out of this report?
Malvika, this is a major development that we are getting to know. First of all, I'd like to take you through the key takeaways from the 15-page report. First of all, both engines shut down mid-air within seconds after takeoff. Fuel cut off, switches moved from run to cut off one after another in just 1 second. The report revealed that the fuel supply to the engines was cut off. And cockpit audio confirms one pilot asked, "Why did you cut off?" and the other replied, "I didn't." Another key takeaway that we need to note is when the engines lost power, the ram air turbine, a small propeller-like device, was deployed automatically to provide emergency hydraulic power. And the CCTV footage obtained by AAIB showed RAT being deployed, as well as another key takeaway to note is the pilots tried to restart the engine. N1 or engine 1 was partially recovered, but engine 2 failed to recover before impact. The aircraft was airborne for only 32 seconds and crashed 0.9 nm from the runway into a hostel. And when we're talking about another key takeaway was the fact that thrust levers found at idle, but the black box shows takeoff thrust was still engaged, suggesting a disconnect or a failure. And fuel tested clean, and there was no contamination from refueling sources. And the flap setting, which was 5 degrees, and gear down were normal for takeoff. And there was no bird activity or weather issues. Clear skies and good visibility. Light winds were also one of the key takeaways in the report as well. And according to the AAIB report, it said the credentials of the pilots were clear and both were medically fit and rested with adequate experience on the type. And there was no immediate sabotage evidence, but a known FAA advisory on a possible fuel switch flaw existed. Inspections were not done by Air India. The aircraft was within weight and balance limits, and there was no dangerous good on board. So those were the key takeaways. Another point to note is the fact that at this stage, the AAIB has not issued any safety recommendations for Boeing 787-8 aircraft or GE NX-1B engine operators and manufacturers. Another thing to note is engine once its core deceleration halted, it was reversed and began progressing toward recovery after initial failure. And the engine 2 relit but could not arrest core speed deceleration despite repeated fuel reintroduction attempts. And at 13:38:42 IST, the aircraft reached 180 knots IS, and immediately after, both engines' fuel cutoff switches moved from run to cut off, and fuel switches for engines 1 and 2 were returned to run within seconds. EGTs for both engines also rose, indicating relief efforts as well. And this also highlights the confusion between the pilots as well. The cockpit voice recording indicates confusion because one of the pilots was asking, why did you cut off? And the other responded, I did not do so. And both the engines dropped below idle speed. Engine and aircraft flight recorder data confirmed that N2 values in both engines fell below minimum ideal speed as well. And the back flight recorder too damaged to get data. So that's another important pointer to note. However, the aft engine and aircraft flight recorder was found to be substantially damaged in the incident and could not be downloaded using conventional methods. That's what the report stated. And over to you, Malvika.
Well, Ria, thank you for those details. My colleague Brian Thomas is also now joining us live. Brian, the preliminary report, of course, has been released now. Take us through the details. What are you learning? What exactly does the report indicate currently?
Well, Malvika, clearly now the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, that is the AAIB, has released its very preliminary findings into the tragic air crash that has happened of AI-171 in Ahmedabad. Now, clearly, this is a 15-page report that we are talking about that was made public late Friday. And clearly, we were talking about it. And it really offers an early glimpse into the ongoing investigation on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner that was bound for London Gatwick. Now, very clearly, the aircraft crashed shortly after takeoff, slamming into a medical hospital complex near the airport. This is what we know. Now, clearly, there was a passenger also who survived. And very importantly, there was a separate status update on the incident also that was shared by the Civil Aviation Ministry that happened again on June 22nd. Now, there are 10 key takeaways from the AAIB's preliminary reports. First being the fuel to both engines were cut off seconds after takeoff. Now, that is a matter of question because within 3 seconds of the liftoff, the fuel control switches for both engines transition from run to cut off within 1 second of each other, causing a complete and sudden loss of thrust. Now, another one being a cockpit confusion that suggests a possible malfunction, where cockpit recordings also captured a pilot asking, why did you cut off? To which the other also responded to co-pilot that he did not do so, indicating possible technical failure or accidental switch activation, but it still needs to be identified and analyzed more as to why the confusion happened and what led to the confusion. Again, the point being the engine restart failed on one side and flight data shows that engine 1 successfully attempted a relight while engine 2 could not even recover despite multiple fuel reintroduction that was made. Then being the emergency power deployed instantly where the RAT, that is the RAM air turbine, which is a backup power system, dropped right after takeoff, which is a clear sign of total power loss that also happened. There was a mayday call moments before impact where a distress call was also made at 8:09 UTC, just seconds before the aircraft crashed into buildings outside the airport boundary. Then the plane crashed with the engine that was off and the nose being up, where the aircraft struck structures with an 8-degree nose up pitch and level wings, but with both engines again being inactive, which couldn't even maintain a climb. There was a takeoff configuration that was normal, where flap settings and landing gears were also in standard position for takeoff, and even post crash also the thrust levels also were found ideal, consistent with in-flight fuel cutoff despite being at takeoff thrust moments earlier. And clearly the plane also struck multiple winglings and even left a trail of debris in a large area near the BJ Medical College Hospital, including a dislodged engine, wings and landing gear. Clearly, the plane also had a valid worthiness certificate and only minor category C and category D MEL, that is the minimum equipment list issues, which was non-related to the fuel control system. And clearly also, Boeing had also issued a non-mandatory advisory about fuel control switch locks, which Air India had not acted upon, and the aircraft had also throttle module replacements in both 2019 and 2023. But no history of malfunction with the fuel control switches happened. Now, clearly, the probe is remaining active. Investigators are also awaiting results from fuel samples, analysis, postmortems, and forensic tests, while the AAIB has not yet issued any safety recommendation, but the findings have clearly sparked serious concerns about the possible technical flaws or an unintended cockpit action involved in the aircraft's fuel cutoff system. Yes, Malvika.
Well, stay on with us.